comprennent pas l'anglais, il y a des casques de traduction parce que cette présentation va être en anglais. Sabine Rau-Oberhuber, évidemment, vient de la famille Rau, Thomas Rau en étant son mari, et puis c'est lui qui avait écrit ce fameux livre Materials Matter, c'est-à-dire les matières comptent, et qui nous a quand même beaucoup influencé dans cette pensée qu'il faut, parce que c'était il y a une dizaine d'années, plus que ça, peut-être une vingtaine d'années. Donc c'était une alerte, et ensemble, ils ont construit plusieurs choses, entre autres cette idée de Malaster qui sera présentée après par Kevin Richardson, qui est là avec nous aujourd'hui. Sabine ne pouvait pas être avec nous. Hello Sabine. Parce qu'elle devait rester aux Pays-Bas pour quelque chose de personnel. Sabina, are you ready to start?
Yes, I'm definitely ready.
And you have 15 minutes.
Yes, and I will respect my 15 minutes.
Thank you very much for coming with us. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sincerely sorry that I can't be with you in France. Excusez-moi. Je parle français, mais pas pour présenter en anglais, pour présenter en français. Donc, je vais continuer en anglais. Donc, thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope you can see my slides from here. So what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit a bigger view of our philosophy of construction and circularity, because I think you had heard enough, very, very much in depth of the technicalities of circular construction, but I wanted to share with you a bigger view on why it is so necessary that we change our way of doing. And for me, the current poly crisis in which we are can be summarized very nicely, I think, in this sentence by Kenneth Boulding, an US economist, which he phrased 50 years ago: anyone who believes in infinite growth of anything physical on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist. And as architects, we are dealing with so much physical that we have to really embrace the fact that we are guests on this planet, and that we have to treat everything in a way that we adhere to the planetary rules, so the house rules of planet Earth, which means that, yes, we have to treat things which are finite in the way that the other generations after us will come and wanting to use those same materials. So what it means is that we have to have a systems change. And for us, it consists of a couple of interventions. And the first being actually really thinking about the circular business models, the business models we apply, and how we define responsibility and ownership in our systems. And an example I wanted to share with you is the example of the airport of Schiphol, where they had a challenge for the lighting of their lounges, which should last for 15 years, but they could not find anything which could go beyond 6 years. So we turned with them to Philips and asked if they could help us with a different model. We said Philips is going to be responsible for 15 years for the lighting and really own the problem, not only the lighting equipment. And what it meant is that they had to really rethink why the equipment would not last for the time it was supposed to. And it turned out it was just a little driver, but the design was made in a way that everything had to be dismantled and trashed. And because suddenly Philips owned the problem literally, they went back to the design table and changed the design. And what you see here is in the red line is the old design, and the new design in blue, which shows that suddenly as Philips is now responsible for the complete life cycle, the equipment is maintainable, it's upgradable, it's modular, it is made for disassembly, so it can be reused at a different client at once Schiphol does not need it anymore. So I think this is a very fundamental paradigm shift of how shifting responsibilities also shifts incentives, which we really need in order to get a different system. The next definitely is circular design. The design principles were already also part of the solution in the circular case. And I want to share with you a couple of examples from our practice at Rauw, where we started really thinking of buildings as material banks. So instead of building buildings with sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, so bear with me. So what we did with the Triodos Bank is we conceived of a building which consisted of 5 structural elements which were prefabricated, and in fact the construction of the Triodos Bank was in a way only as an assembly. It was designed for reconstruction from the outset. It is held together with 360,000 screws made of those standard elements. And what we also saw in that turning this, adapting the construction procedure is that you get a logistics process instead of a normal construction process. So the circular construction is also having a very big influence on the construction culture itself. And what it meant in the end was that we also could save enormously on construction time. So instead of 13 months, instead of 18 months, this building was constructed in 13 months. And this means that circular construction is not only a way of being a more responsible architect, more responsible citizen, but it's also really bringing economic incentives once we do it right and once we understand how to do it. And what I think is very important about the project is that it has already 5 future use cycles have been imagined for this building. And at the same time, it's not only a building which has won 8 green awards, it has also won the award of the Office Building of the Year. So circular, building circular does not mean that things have to get dull or only very standardized. You can, via standardization, you can really create beautiful forms. And I think Mehmet showed not a lot of examples of these incredibly beautiful forms, which had been created before the 21st century. This is actually the project which was announced. It's called Looppark. It's a parking garage in Luxembourg, which we designed in the way that it's not only a building which you can assemble and reassemble, but it is also a building. It is also a building which you can give a different function. So from it's an architecture as an adaptable structure. So you can make it not only smaller and bigger, you can actually transform it into a different building, from a parking garage into an office building. So obviously, we had to think also of the structural elements. The parking garage has much less beams than an office building would need. So if you adapt this building, you can not only adapt the number of beams which you have to as structural supporting structures, but you also have different layers and different height of the floors. And this is what you see here. So the construction enables a completely different layout of the floor plan. And this is how the structure looks from close. Another example is the expo in Osaka, where Rauw was commissioned to design the Dutch pavilion Also, this structure is designed for disassembly. And as a matter of fact, it has now been disassembled. It is in a warehouse in Osaka, waiting for its reincarnation in a second life on Awaji Island, where it will serve as a community hub for on a big campus, a sustainability campus for the company Persona. What is also very important, and my colleague Kevin will share more about that, is that we also need to enable circularity. So if we have a circular building, it does not mean that it is really already also being deployed circularly. Because if you don't know what you have, then it is really difficult to reuse it in the future. And that is why we coined the phrase, waste is a material without identity. So what you see here is not an artificial skiing ramp. It is the waste on the streets of Beirut piling up. And therefore we created the cadastre for materials. And this is something my colleague Kevin will elaborate on after my contribution. What we see happening as well is that there is more and more debate how we should deploy materials in our societies in general. And what we see more and more happening is that the materials are being discovered as a new asset class, so that companies start to treat materials as an asset which is being used and then reused in the future again, and at the same time it sort of becomes an investment vehicle. We think materials should be treated as a commons. So yes, we should rethink material ownership, but in a way that we are creating a value chain and a value sustain chain at the same time, which means that material moves back and forth depending where it is in its application, and at the same time create a financial stream to the places where these materials have been mined, so that we create a much more just system in our society. This is quite a utopian view at the moment, but when we wrote our book 10 years ago, it seemed very utopian, and now I see it's everywhere popping up that people start to think about how could we create those systems where the preservation of material actually is also driven by the fact that there's a financial model around it for its preservation. Last but least is also very much about mind change. I think this is actually where it starts. And it's also about our attitudes towards materials. And because materials are the fundaments of our lives, we created the Universal Declaration of Material Rights, actually making also the UN aware that also materials have to be treated with dignity. And I think there's nothing less dignified than being treated as waste. So, and we see that this has become part of a larger movement where also nature rights, etc., are being slowly being recognized as part of the fabric of life. Last but not least, when you are a change maker, and I think many in these rooms of you are change makers, the question resides also always with me: what is my personal motivation? What makes me tick and what gives me energy? And for me personally, this is very much also this legacy we are leaving behind for the next generation. And certainly when we're talking about materials, is our children, grandchildren, and their children who will want to live in a world where materials are available as well to build their dreams. And therefore, I coined the phrase, which I borrowed from Patek Philippe, because I believe that we have to treat every material as a precious Swiss watch. And therefore, our slogan has become, you never actually own a material, you merely take care for it for the next generation. Thank you so much for your attention. If you want to know more, this is the book Maria kindly mentioned in the beginning. It's available in 5 languages, so in Dutch, in English, in Italian, in German, and in Japanese. And please reach out if you have any further questions concerning our projects, concerning our work, or if you want to have an exchange. And thank you so much for letting me be part of this conference.
Thank you very much, Sabine. We see you very soon.
Thank you.